Good evening, everybody, and you're all very welcome to the Wood Technology online learning event, Wood Technology in Action. Thank you all very much for joining us on this autumn evening. It's a nice sunny evening here in County Mayo. I'm in Mayo Education Centre this evening, so you're all very welcome. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Declan Regan, and I'll be your host for the evening. Whether you are joining us from your school or from your home, whether you are watching on a PC, laptop, or mobile device, I hope that you can hear and see us clearly and that you enjoy this evening's event. Later in the webinar, we will have a panel discussion with practicing teachers Mark McGinn and Lindsay Balfe to discuss their approaches to the teaching and learning in their classrooms and to gain an insight into wood technology in action in their schools. We look forward to that. Tonight, we are using the Zoom webinar platform to broadcast this event. Throughout the course of the event, you will be able to ask us questions in the Q&A function. Only the Wood Technology team will be able to see your questions and we will respond to your questions privately. If you have any questions for our guest teachers, you can also ask them through the Q&A function, and hopefully we will get an opportunity to address these through our live discussion with Mark and Lindsay later on. We will only use the chat function to distribute links to supporting documents and materials as required. The view function on the top right-hand side of your screen will allow you to switch the full screen mode on and off. If you wish to gain access to your desktop taskbar, you may switch the full screen mode off. The Wood Technology team of advisors for 2021-2022 are myself, Declan Regan, Martin Gallagher, Michael Lynch, and our technologies team leader, Gerard Duff. Tonight, I'm joined by Martin, who's in the background, and he will be taking care of any technical issues, and also he will be part of the Q&A session later on today. And I'd also like to thank our colleague from the Applied Technology team as well, Ronan McGovern, for joining us. They will work together to answer any questions or queries you may submit through the Q&A function during this evening's event. For questions that we are unable to get to this evening, we will respond to these via email at the earliest opportunity. So looking forward to this evening, what we intend to do is the following. We intend to explore the pedagogical approaches with two teachers in their Wood Technology classrooms. We will consider strategies that support the incremental development of student skills in Wood Technology. And we will reflect on our insights and learning from this evening's webinar. Throughout the course of the webinar this evening, I'd like you to consider the strategies and approaches that you employ that support effective teaching and learning in your own classrooms. There might be an approach or a strategy or a methodology that one of our panelists would like to share with you and that you'd like to try out in your own classrooms. As always, our starting point is our subject specification, including the rationale and aim of the subject. I invite you to consider the extract from the subject specification and in particular the rationale. And from the rationale, we can see that problem solving, creating, innovation, communication, collaboration, and exploration are central pillars in the subject of wood technology. The rationale also states that through the challenges posed by the design-based philosophy of the subject, students will develop the relevant knowledge, skills, and values to bring ideas from conception to reality in a way that will allow them to be expressive, creative, and innovative. All of these skills, of course, can be developed in an active learning environment and indeed in your own classrooms. So making those links with the rationale, we've identified a number of themes from the subject specification, which support effective teaching and learning in wood technology. The first of which we're going to explore with our teachers this evening is the area of creativity. We're also going to have a look at the area of skills development, and this will all tie up with an integrated approach to the teaching and learning and assessment of the subject. We will discuss these themes with our guest teachers this evening to gain insights into the approaches and strategies that they employ to teach their own students. So the following teachers will discuss their approaches to teaching and learning in their school context. So first of all, we have Mark McGinn, and Mark is teaching in Borrisokane Community College in County Tipperary. And we also have Lindsay Balfe, who teaches in Swords, North County Dublin. She's teaching in Swords Community College. So later on, we will get an opportunity to have a discussion with them. So as we can see here, we've a very diverse, I suppose, country, and we're bringing you teaching and learning and insights from schools from both sides of the country, I suppose, really. We have Mark in Borrisokane and we have Lindsay over in Swords. So we look forward to that, as we said. So firstly, we will look at Mark's perspective in his school in Borrisokane. So with Mark, what we will be doing is we will be looking at his junior cycle groups, and his focus for this evening will be on the following areas. So in relation to creativity, Mark will be looking at using design tasks to encourage students to think for themselves and to be creative. He will also look at the integrated approach in the subject and how he employs that, and the changes in his practice and indeed his subject department's practice in relation to assessment, whilst encouraging students to engage in self-directed learning. Also, Mark will have a brief look at how the use of digital learning platforms supports his students as they learn. So at this point in time, I'm now going to ask Mark to introduce himself. So I might ask Mark to switch on his camera and his microphone. Hopefully there isn't any gremlins there, Mark, in the background affecting your technical abilities. How are you, Mark, this evening?
I'm very well, Declan. And
you're very welcome. You're very welcome to this evening's webinar. So, Mark, you just might tell us what part of the country you are in yourself there.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm a wood technology and construction studies teacher here in Borrisokane Community College in Tipperary. And yeah, we've, I suppose, been on a bit of a journey over the last couple of years and tried a couple of new things and strategies, and looking forward to sharing them with practicing teachers this evening through the webinar, and happy to have a chat afterwards about anything that may be of interest.
That's great, Mark. Thanks very much. And as you said there, you will share some of your insights into your own teaching there with teachers. So I might just ask Mark to switch off his camera there once more and his microphone. And I'm going to share a little video that Mark has put together for us as regards teaching and learning.
Hi, my name is Mark McGinn and I'm a wood technology and construction studies teacher here in Borrisokane Community College in County Tipperary. In this presentation, I'm going to discuss project work, changes in our approach to project work, our assessment methods, and I'm going to give you a little bit of feedback from our students. But before we do that, I'm going to invite you into my woodwork room in Borrisokane Community College.
Hi, I'm Aoibhinn. Welcome to the woodwork department. Let's see what's happening in Mr. McGinn's room.
In here, we are woodworkers.
In first year, all students have the opportunity to try wood technology for the entire year. They learn essential woodworking skills such as marking out procedures, using hand tools, and experience an introduction to the use of power tools and machinery, while also learning about the importance of health and safety. This first year group are currently making a pencil holder, and as you can see, they are active and engaged in this activity. If students decide to keep on wood technology as a subject, they will engage in many activities throughout the next 3 years. There's a strong emphasis on product design, and students are supported in developing their own unique design ideas. Student projects encourage the development of important woodworking skills such as carving, joint work, laminating, wood turning, while also focusing on the theory aspect of the subject. Wood technology is a very popular subject with students here in Borrisokane Community College.
I'm looking forward to the rest of this year.
So, here are examples of some projects we do with first years. Nice, simple, straightforward projects, I suppose designed to give students a feel for the subject while also teaching them key skills that would be extremely important and beneficial should they decide to keep the subject on. And we have a very high uptake of wood technology students in Borrisokane Community College. So just to briefly speak about them, this is a little pencil project we do, and you could see in the earlier video the students creating that pencil project. Some really nice processes in it, a nice introduction to the pillar drill and also using the plane, a nice little boat project over here, a nice little introduction to trench work, again using the pillar drill, and then we have a letter holder which introduces a nice little house joint there. This piece would be distributed out in one large piece to the students, so they would have to cut it into the 3 sizes, and also some introduction to sawing at an angle and so on. You can just see some images here of that pencil project and how the students are enjoying engaging with that. Also have an image of a clown project that we do, and this clown spins along this curved section over here, so it's a nice introduction to the coping saw, using the likes of carbon paper to transfer the design, accuracy when drilling holes so that these dowels all line up, planing against the grain and so on, and the fact that it moves and spins around, it's a fun project and students love making it. So traditionally we would have done projects like this with students in second year, and it's a stool project. It's a nice project. You can see here, and you see them all lined up ready to be brought home. They're different yet very similar, and I suppose that's the tone of what I'm going to talk about now over the next couple of minutes. And I suppose the fact that they're so similar, you can see why. You can reflecting back on it now, they were always going to look somewhat similar because students were given a bundle of material, and they were also given a very detailed drawing and even down to the templates. So it was quite prescribed, and don't get me wrong, a lovely project, and students did have an opportunity to put their own slant on it, but it did bring on their skill set as well. But it just, I suppose, from when they got to third year, they would have struggled when it came to the likes of having to design their own projects. And another example then would be this little flower pot holder. Again, the same, I suppose, as what I've mentioned previously. Lovely project, nice joint work in it, lots of joint work in this particular project, but they do look very similar. It was created by giving students out a drawing, and while they did do their own little bit of pyrography and so on, when they're all lined up at the end, they did look quite the same. What has changed? So within our department, we, I suppose, took a bit of a leap of faith a couple of years ago, and instead of giving students the likes of the stool project or the flower pot holder that I demonstrated earlier in the presentation, we decided to give students a brief. So a sample brief, like any brief we see every year in third year, and one example of this would be for a mobile phone holder. And we used the language of the brief, so we said things like, it must incorporate joint work, it must incorporate decorative skills, it must incorporate a secondary function, it should also consider how the device is charged when stored. We created a problem and we asked our students to solve it, essentially, and we just gave them that head start for third year. And we know how important the project and the portfolio is to our subject. It's such a big bulk of the marks, and I think every wood technology teacher or former materials technology wood teacher understands how difficult it can be in those weeks, from Halloween up through November, where you're trying to get projects off the ground and you're trying to get students up and running. So this has worked for us, and just to kind of take you through it a little bit now, I suppose these changes as well, it's worth remembering that they were in line with the new junior cycle, and it got us to start trusting students a little bit more and to, I suppose, empower them really and change their mindset away from what am I making, where's the drawing, where's the timber, compared to like, right, this is how I'm going to solve this problem that you've given me. This is my design. Is there any chance I can get an extra piece of timber? It needs to be this size, or it needs to be that size, or and so on. And as I said, it really did empower students and give them a great little head start going into third year. So this is just an example of that phone holder. Now, look, again, they do look similar, but if you really analyze them and break them down, they're actually all quite different. Some of them are turned a different way on the base. The base themselves, they're different widths, they're different shapes. All of the parts where the phone is held up top is totally different. This one here is interesting in that this student chose to kind of orientate his one this way, and you can see his little charging port specific to his own phone down the bottom. So from our point of view, at the start of second year, this was a real good step in the right direction, considering these projects were made with no drawing, and the students were just given the material and they had to come up with their own designs, and all of them work, and they've justified the brief that was given to them. Very nice project there again, and nice quality finish and nice joint work there too, particularly for a second year student. So moving on from that, then we said, right, that went well, let's try it with a bigger project, along the lines of the likes of your stool project and so on. And we knew the confidence was up with our students having went through the process, so we decided to give them a storage holder, or like a traditional, I suppose, if you want to call it, a spice rack, that would be made in many woodwork rooms across the country for many years. And here's an example of just some of the different variations we got, and you can see here that the students' own individual creativity is kind of coming out even a little bit more. And we really emphasize that this should be a storage solution for your own personal items. So you can see here that this particular student has it in her bedroom, and she's a candle and bits and pieces on it there. And this student is into horse riding and has a couple of horses at home, and this was specifically designed to hold certain piece of equipment that she needed. And this student here is into gaming and so on. And funnily enough, we did have a student who actually made a spice rack, and he did a great job on it as well, and he actually requested longer timber. And when you see someone coming to you and they're justifying why, like that's a great place to be in as a woodwork teacher, and you've no problem giving them the extra piece of timber. And he actually didn't want to use a round dowel, he wanted to use square dowels here, and he wanted to join them in. And like this, as a second year student, and you can see the level of joint work that's gone into it, and all of these decisions were made by him. He chose the location of this piece of material to stop the jars falling off himself, and that was all driven by research that he carried out, primary research. He looked at what was going to go into it and so on. And the same with this student over here, with the personal items within their bedroom. So it really was a good step in the right direction. And this one here, it was gas, I suppose. This student wanted to put eggs into the bottom of his one, and he was saying, I wonder what size I'll drill the hole. And off he went up to the home ec room, and he had his calipers down in the room, and he was trying to pick a good diameter that was going to suit, and he was testing holes and so on. And again, he determined where those holes went, how many of them were there, the height that the shelf was going to be, so he could get the eggs in and out and so on. So as I said, empowered the student, put it back into their hands. You make the decisions, you solve the problems, you solve the brief that's been given to you. And just as I record this video today, the design briefs have been released nationally, and met with my third years today, and like there wasn't that fear that I'd often be familiar with students when you're going through a brief and you're analysing it. And it definitely attributed back to, I suppose, the experience that the likes of these students have now in second year. So for just the second half of the presentation, I'd like to talk a little bit about assessment, because this is something else that we've changed within our department as well over the past number of years. So again, like in line with the new junior cycle, we decided to bring in self-assessment and peer assessment. And again, there's that word trust. We said we'd trust our students again, we'd put trust in them, and trust that they would, go through the grading process. And obviously this involved a change of mindset from the students, from the teachers as well. I suppose we're all so used to over the years, grading our students' work. But again, it did empower the students, and there were so many positive knock-on effects as well. Like, I suppose we talk about our school self-evaluation targets, and for me, our school self-evaluation targets were the likes of sharing success criteria with our students in advance, and also self-assessment. And I suppose they went hand in hand, because when you're creating the likes of the self-assessment sheets, which I'm going to show on the next slide, they were already created, so it allowed us to share them with the students before they even took into the project. So they knew in advance the critical areas of the project, and I think that's been a really, really important aspect of this for us. So this self-assessment process that we do, it incorporated assessment under 3 lenses, as opposed to, I suppose, the traditional teacher-only assessment where you pick up the project and grade it. So you'd have the self-assessment lens, which would be where the student would go through the process of self-assessment themselves. A peer would then assess their work and go through their set of grades, and verify the initial students' grading of themselves, and then the teacher would oversee all this and provide their assessment as well. And I suppose what we found was that students were actually very, very self-aware, and very frequently they would be very close to where your estimations would be. And in fact, the fear in advance probably would have been thinking back that students would over reward themselves marks, but it was probably the opposite really. The students were probably a little bit critical of themselves, if anything. But overall, I would say students were very self-aware and very tuned into where their grades should be. And again, just to mention, it's not all about grades. I really want to emphasize that while that is a part of it, it is important that it's about the journey and it's about the process. And the whole thing with self-assessment is knowing how you arrived at a specific grade. And if you know how you arrived there, well, then you can either maintain that grade if it's high, or you can work towards improving that grade. And that's, I suppose, where we want all our students to be. So here's an example of a self-assessment sheet that we created within our department, and it's actually for that display or spice rack project, if you want to call it that. And you can see it just goes through the different criteria. So if we talk about the different joint work aspects to the project, or shaping and so on, and it allows the student to see in advance, right, there's 40 marks going for this, and there's only 10 marks going for this. So for example, if there's 40 marks going for joint work and there's 10 marks going for pyrography, they understand very quickly, right, it's crucial that the joint work is good and to a good standard, and I get it done. And if I get around to doing the little bit of pyrography, great. If I don't, it's not the end of the world in this case. And just I suppose over here, something that we added again at a later stage was just this little reflection activity, because reflection is so important. I think we do it all the time as professionals, and it's very important for our students to do as well. So it could be something as simple as one aspect you really enjoyed, one thing you learned, or one thing that you would do differently. And it's amazing when you get students to look back on that. I love reading them, and it's just a little insight into how they found the project. And very importantly then, it allows us as teachers to look at that project and how successful it was, and evaluate, right, is this going well? You might have ideas that it is yourself, and if the students are feeding back that it is, fantastic. But if they're not, it allows you to make tweaks and changes then from year to year. And just one other little thing is, like, we often, even from time to time, get the students to write their own monthly assessment comment for the likes of ePortal and so on. And again, you'd be surprised at how self-aware they can be, telling you areas that they need to work better on and so on. So just briefly, what our students say, and just I suppose an overview of this would be that students would prefer the likes of the self, peer and teacher assessment process as opposed to teacher only assessment. Okay, And, you know, if you look at some of the comments here, they like self-assessment because it makes you look and think about your project and analyze it, where you can improve and where you've done well, because you can see where you went wrong and what you did good and so on, as the student said. And does self-assessment help to improve, help you to improve in wood technology? And, you know, again, they all said it, well, 7 said that it did and 5 said maybe. Nobody said no, and I think that's the key thing for me, that no one is saying that it's a bad thing. Okay, and obviously there's 7 people buying into it there, more than the 5. It's just a small group I did this survey with. But you know, and like again, the comments, you can see what you did wrong and you can fix it, or if you got a bad score, you know that went wrong, and if you got a good score, you know what to be proud of, and so on. So again, the language that the young people are using for the likes of second year students, they're very mature and very clued into where they need to be. And just the last little point on that is, I suppose this process here, it's worth mentioning, started out originally as an A4 sheet, as you see it, printed off and handed out to students. But, you know, over a period of time, like we're an iPad school, you know, this has kind of taken on a bit of a life of its own, and it's been digitized and it's now shared in the form of an assignment on Microsoft Teams and so on. But, you know, I just asked the students here which they would prefer, and, you know, they would say that they preferred it on Teams, and it's easier to get in and complete, and, you know, they've keeps all their assessments and pictures of projects together for them and the teacher and so on. But, you know, that's where we're at the moment. Like, we didn't start there, and, you know, I do want to emphasize that as well, and I don't want to kind of try and oversell this, I suppose. And, you know, if someone is maybe open to trying this self-assessment procedure or techniques, maybe you're doing it already, this is just an insight into what we're doing. It might be something as simple as, you know, starting with the A4 sheet as mentioned here, and printing it off and distributing it to students and collecting it back again. And then, you know, maybe after a period of time it might end up taking on a life of its own, and you'll make your own changes to it. But that is, I suppose, pretty much the end of my presentation. And it's just a little insight into what we're currently doing in our department, and some things that are working quite well for us. We're not saying by any means it's the be all and end all of everything, but they're just things that I suppose over the last number of years we've seen a really good rise in our grades across the board. We'd often chat about it, and we'd attribute a lot of it back to some of these new procedures that we're doing. Thanks for your time, and, you know, feel free to get in touch. My email address is there on screen, and my Twitter handle is there as well. So if anyone ever wants to get in touch or to share resources or to have a chat, by all means, feel free to give me a shout.
So thanks very much to Mark for recording that for us. He gave us some great insights. So just returning to our themes for this evening, in Mark's video, we saw how he promotes creativity in his classroom, and he shared some of his strategies and approaches with us. So what I'd like us to do, folks, is I'd like to invite you to maybe take a moment to reflect on the question on your screen in relation to creativity. Maybe there is an approach or a strategy, an idea or a technique that you use yourself that you would like to share with us. If you wish to share it with us, please feel free to jot it down on a piece of paper, and we can capture this through the Q&A function if you so wish. Hopefully we will get an opportunity to share some of these with the audience later on. So how can you enhance your approaches to teaching and learning to encourage creativity in your own classroom? So now we will look at Lindsay's perspective in her school in Swords, County Dublin. So Lindsay focused on the following: using sketching as a medium of communication to explore design ideas to promote creativity in her classroom. She also looked at the area of the layout of her classroom. As Lindsay is in a new school, she's trying to lay out her classroom in such a way that it will promote and encourage an integrated approach to her teaching and learning. And she will also look at using a variety of media to record student work and providing opportunities to develop their skills of reflection and evaluation in the subject. So at this point in time, I'm going to introduce you to Lindsay. So I'd like to ask Lindsay to switch on her microphone and her camera. Lindsay, how are you this evening?
Hey Declan, how are you?
Good. How's everybody in Swords, County Dublin?
Not too bad. It's nice and dry down here anyway, so.
That's great. It seems to be nice and dry across the country. So thanks for joining us, Lindsay. So Lindsay, I'm going to, I suppose, introduce your video, and it's nice and short, so we'll get to that, and then hopefully we'll get an opportunity to have a discussion after that. So thanks for joining us, Lindsay, and we'll talk to you shortly. So if you wouldn't mind switching off your camera and your microphone, thank you.
Hi, my name is Lindsay. I'm a teacher here in Swords Community College in Dublin. So to give you a bit of background, we moved to our brand new building in, I'd say, the middle of August last year during COVID. Now it's been a bit of a struggle the past year because between COVID and Brexit and that, we were waiting for equipment and materials and tools and stuff to come in. So I'm between lockdowns trying to get the room up and running and building storage and things like that. But I will give you a quick overview of how we have the room kind of set up now. Some of the ideas that we're hoping to do with when we get time. I'll turn it around and give you a quick tour. So you can see here, this is one of the walls that we've done. The blank ones up at the top are just blades that have been broken, so I haven't had a chance to change the blades and fix them. This idea came from Skerries Community College. I visited their room, seeing how they use or how they store equipment and tools. We have it done as a French cleat system, so I'll show you in some of the others. We can actually take any of those off and bring them onto a table. So even with these, we can lift them up and move them onto a desk if we need to use them. So these had doors. We took them off mainly because they weren't lockable, so our plan is to build out here that we can lock all away our other tools and any of the glue and stuff. That's another part that we're going to do in the near future. So this is more of our marking out area, we call it. So we have our rulers there, which is just really handy to see that we have everything. We have a couple sliding bevels. Again, our marker tools are all out here. Same thing as the others. This is a French cleat system, so you actually can take it completely off and put it onto a desk and put it back out of the way. So it works really, really handy. So this is just a quick, sorry, it's a bit messy, but a view of our desks. So we've changed the seating arrangement just to have them at an angle, so the board is just up here. So none of the kids have their back to the board, which has worked out really, really well. One of the reasons we do it is because we use this system here to do practical for demonstrations. So a lot of the marking out, just try to see if I'll put my school iPad up here, facing down. I can do all the marking out, and we just mirror it to the board so students are able to follow along, and it works out really handy for doing marking out. One of the things that we plan on doing is cutting the lip, putting a new board on top of that, and putting a vise, so we'll be able to actually do cutting out and a few other bits there, not just the marking out. We can see here, this is our border layout. So one of the other things that we've done here is these, in any of the new buildings, they give you these teaching walls. It's normally meant to be 3 doors. We've kind of taken them off. What we try to do here is use what we have. So we cut into the shelves and things that were there, and we have places for our tools, for the hammers and for screwdrivers and such. And then the same here, if we move this across, you'll see here we have this made up as well. So it's just been slow going with just the two of us trying to, at the start, getting this set up. We've also made our clamp walls for any of our hand clamps and quick grips and things. We have them all down here. So this works out really, really nice for our area. So this is just a video just showing the entire room. So I'll just go slowly to show where our tools are and the benches and give you a proper view of the entire layout of our room. With wood technology, there is more of an emphasis on sketching and design. So with that in mind, we developed these workbooks to help develop students' sketching abilities. So we start off with basic line construction, we work up to 1 point, then 2 point perspective. We put in challenges in between these sections so students can really work on developing their skills. We practice rendering techniques and looking for light sources in between on these challenges as well. Then we start looking at going to 2D shapes. So we'll build on developing 2D shapes and how to break down images. Then we'll work on drawing and sketching 3D images. These skills are then used in the digital portfolios that students get with all their projects. Students use these portfolios to develop their designs. We also encourage them to make models of each project. They add these to the digital portfolios and they break down the designs and add annotations to them also. This helps students reflect on their designs as they're developing them. As students are starting their project, we get them to take pictures of any tools that they may use, and they also have to create instructions on how they use these tools for each section of their project. These are just some examples of pictures and videos students would take as they're creating. So in this project, they have to make templates of their wing designs for their project before they're allowed to cut them out. They have to show how they've cut them out, how they designed them, and put this into their portfolio. Also, by using the digital portfolio, students are able to record themselves when they learn new skills. Like on this project, they also learned how to use the spoke shave. They record a video of them using it, and then in their portfolio would give instructions of how to use it, and also any health and safety considerations before they start using this tool. So as I said previously, we've made it standard practice that students get these digital portfolios for every project. I found it's really helped with getting students to reflect on different stages of their project, from their design to their manufacturing to the finishing of the project. I hope I've given you a bit of an insight into how we teach wood technology in Swords Community College, and if you'd like any of the resources or to share the digital portfolio, please let me know and I'm more than happy to share a copy. Hi.
Okay, folks, so I'd like to thank Lindsay again for recording that for us, and just returning to our themes there briefly again once more from this evening: creativity, skills development, and the integrated approach to teaching and learning in the subject. You would have noticed that in Lindsay's video, we saw how she encourages skills development in her classroom, and you've seen there at the very end how the students are capturing their own learning and the skills that they're learning, and even describing the application of tools to the material as they learn new skills. She shared some of her strategies and approaches. And what I'd like you to do now, folks, is to maybe just to reflect again on what you've just seen there. And in relation to skills development, I'd like to pose this question to you. How can you enhance your approaches to teaching and learning to support your own students' skills development in wood technology? And again, if you've anything you'd like to share, please feel free to share it through the question and answer function. And hopefully we'll get an opportunity to share some of those later on with our audience. So at this point of the evening, folks, we will now have our panel discussion. So I invite Lindsay and Mark to switch on their cameras for me, please, and also their microphones. So Lindsay and Mark, you're very, very welcome, and thank you very, very much for putting those video recordings together for us. We do appreciate them, and also the fact that you're very, very busy in your own schools at the moment. And a lot of teachers, particularly teachers of current third years, are going through an awful lot at the moment in terms of project briefs just coming out on the back of the CBAs being completed. So I might just start off there, folks, and I'll just flick on to the next slide momentarily there. I'll just actually switch off my feed there from my PowerPoint presentation, so I'll just stop sharing. So I might just start off with Mark there. So Mark, thanks very much for joining us.
No problem at all, Declan.
Very good. Mark, I just noticed, even from looking at your video there, you mentioned how, a couple of years ago, you would have started off with prescribed projects, and that over time that, they did their job. They did exactly what they said on the tin. The students were learning new skills, particularly the practical skills of the subject. But as you move forward, you begin to realize in your subject department that there might have been gaps, in terms of student skill sets, and also this reliance on students to always continually ask us, what do we do next, sir or miss, And I just want to maybe capture that again. What has changed? Why did it change for you? I know you said what has changed, but why did it change for you?
No problem. The first thing I'll say is this, my internet dropped, or perhaps it was your side there, so I think I got the gist of what you were asking me anyway. But yeah, as you said, at the time we did some fantastic projects, the likes of those stool projects and the flower pot holders and so on, and they were fantastic for bringing on student skill sets. And we would find this when we got to third year, and like this time of year, it was just such a struggle to, it was such a kind of a role reversal where you were trying to, get students to give you a drawing back, as opposed to we were constantly giving them a drawing. Like we never really had any trouble when we got over that hurdle of, I suppose, getting over the brief and analysing it in terms of their skill set, because the projects did bring that on. But it was just such a difficult time, and I'm sure a lot of people online this evening can probably relate to that. But as I mentioned in the presentation, I recorded this on the day that the briefs were released last week, and I have 2 third year groups this year. And I just remember driving home, I had them one after the other, and there just wasn't that fear. When I was talking about a brief, it was just, and I suppose like anything, there was that bit of experience. They'd engaged with it. They knew, they had the red pen out, they were underlining the keywords, they were looking for what was required and so on. And just even from that aspect, it's had a really positive impact on our department here.
Very good. So you're really trying to promote creativity at a much younger age than just in third year. So you're trying to build up those skills incrementally. Just like the practical skills of the subject, you're trying to develop the creative skills, the design skills from a very early stage. Lindsay, I noticed from your own video there, you're starting off in a new school, and there's huge challenges there. I believe you were telling me that currently you don't have third years, so maybe that's a godsend in a way for a moment, for a couple of months at least. But just from talking to Mark and listening to other teachers and what they're going through currently in third year, is there anything that you have learned from what they're experiencing and that you might use moving forward for your own planning for teaching and learning?
We don't have third years for wood technology, but we do have for applied technology. So we are going through the kind of process with them. But similar to what Mark has said, I've always had it, even when it was MTW. When you get to third year projects, you are struggling to get students to give you ideas or designs because you've always given it to them. So when since day one for every project, there's a design aspect in all the projects that we do. There's parts where students have to research, there's parts where students have to evaluate and reflect on their project throughout. I just find that then when you're going to do third year, you're not as stressed out trying to drag drawings or trying to drag designs out of them, or at the end of the portfolio trying to get that tidied up and what's an evaluation, and you get 2 lines back going, my project was good, there's no dents in it, it's held together. So it's trying to teach those skills to students. And I think like I've found, you know, with especially doing design aspects from day one, coming from primary school, they're very used to design, they're very used to being creative. So we use that, like some of the ideas students come up with now, I have to bring them back down a little bit, going, no, we're not going to do that. So no, it's just more fun. So with creative projects, I just find having design the whole way through, and we do design challenges. So in between projects, when we have a little kind of 2-week window where we're waiting between a project or something, we'll get the scrap bin and give them a challenge, like make a desk. With some of the scraps, you have to make something that will help tidy your desk, or make something to hold a tea light. They can just take a double class, and they're great little design ones for them. That's, again, you're throwing these kind of briefs at them. They're used to breaking them down. They know what to do. That my third years now are off researching their projects, and I'm expecting tomorrow for them to have 3 designs ready for me to go, because they're used to doing it.
Thanks for that, Lindsay. And I suppose it's that leap of faith that you mentioned there, Mark, earlier on in your video, that leap of faith of kind of jumping across, trying to do something different. That is a big challenge. And how did you find that challenge? Were you reluctant, or did you realize, no, this is the way to go here? I'm trying to bring in other aspects of the subject. I'm not just focusing on the practical skills. I want to develop their communication skills, their design skills. That was really challenging for you, was it?
Was that for me, Declan? Sorry.
Yeah, sorry. Apologies, Mark. Yeah.
Just skipped at the very beginning there, and apologies if it's from my side.
No
But
problem.
you mentioned about just taking that leap of faith. I think it's a great way of putting it, and I think sometimes we overemphasize like every project being so important, and sometimes you just need to say, look, it's one project, it's a snapshot in time. Let's try something new, and if it goes well, fantastic, we can build on it. And if it doesn't, you know, we're always encouraging our students to reflect, but I think we reflect as well as teachers. And you reflect in, you know, yourself or within your department, and you know, you can always go back and just keep tweaking it and keep changing it. And that's definitely something we've done. You know, when you make a change, just to kind of move away from, right, we've made that change, now we're doing that, that'll do us for another 5 years, just to be open to next year change it again. And in fact, it's funny the way things happen. When I was talking to my colleagues here in Borskane Community College, just in around the time I was recording the video for yourselves, you know, it kind of struck up a couple of more conversations, and as a result, something else, you know, we've changed even some of the things I've been talking about in the video as of last week, and we've kind of a couple of plans, and what if we did this and what if we did that, and it's good. It keeps it fresh, and it keeps it fresh for the students as well.
Thanks for that, Mark. Keeping it fresh is very, very important. And as you mentioned, a lot of the outputs from students are all different, you know, and it's giving you ideas as well. And I might just throw that over to Lindsay there as well. Lindsay, in the whole area of design and allowing students that freedom, do you feel it freshens things up every day? Does it make you more motivated as a teacher to see the ideas that students are coming up with themselves, and, you know, really motivated to complete themselves and realize?
Yeah, and I just find they have more ownership over the project. It's their project. So I've had it where students have, you know, they come with design, they've made a fantastic project, and they'll then come to me going, well, we want to add paint to it. I'll tell them, take their time, there's the paint, off you go. They'll make an absolute mess of it the first time, but they've learned from not to do it again. I've told them what to do, told them to watch it, they reflect on it, because, you know, we all learn more sometimes from our mistakes than anything else. I just find with design that, you know, students are more proud of their project at the end of it, because they had more of an input in it, and they will take more. I just find that the finish is better, you know, because it's their, they want to show everyone that their design, how it turned out, because we do reflect on them. We put them all, everyone will go around and give some feedback on different projects and designs as a group. Just give everyone like critique and learn how to, you know, look at projects, how the marking scheme, how would I mark it up, you know, those kind of things, so they understand where that's all coming from. But they're really proud of it, and they love coming up with something different that nobody else has come up with. It's nearly like a little kind of one, you know, who can do the best design, or who can come up with the most innovative. Like I know I told you before, we were doing birdhouse designs, and a student came in to me with a rolling pin, And I did do a bit of looking going what a rolling pin had to do with a birdhouse, but he had seen that the inside of it was already pre-drilled. He wanted me to cut them into little sections. He was going to use them to store bird feed, but he was going to shape them into toilets inside his birdhouse. Thought it was hilarious. I know I did check that it wasn't his mother's rolling pin before I cut it up, but he told me he went to Homebase and used €2 to buy it. But those are the kind of ideas, you know, you get with students, and it was fantastic. They came out really, really well. But when you're going to do your junior certs project, and design is such a big part of it, they're the kind of things that students will get marked for creativity, and that's the stuff that I love seeing them doing.
Very good. Thanks for that, Lindsay. And I suppose you've kind of both of you have kind of touched on the area of skills development, and we talked about developing the practical skills. Yes, 100%. They're, you know, that's why students come into our classroom in the first place. But I think over the last number of years, we've all seen that design is really driving things forward. And there are so many new aspects to the subject, you know, of wood technology in terms of, you know, there are 3 strands or 4 elements, and, you know, the 3 strands really, there's, I suppose, the practical side of things, which is principles and practices. Then you have the design thinking strand, and then you have, you know, wood science and materials. How are you trying to find, how do you find that balance of trying to have every aspect covered in your own classrooms? And I suppose what I'm talking about is, how do you integrate everything? How do you integrate the practical with the design and with the theory aspects of the subject? I might just ask you there first, Mark, on that.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there. The integrated approach is definitely the way to go. Like, you have creativity on one side versus the skill set on the other. And I see it as the integrated approach being in the middle. And like, I'd encourage anyone, if you were to sit down and write 3 lists, and, you know, write a creativity list of different aspects of the subject, and a skills development one. And if you really looked at, like, maybe some of the things I mentioned in my video in the integrated approach, like, for me, that list would be much longer. Like, I find as well that the integrated approach to doing it, for example, and as Lindsay touched on, putting the ownership back onto the students and allowing them to design their own projects, it actually helps with differentiation as well within the room. And, you know, you have students who are maybe a little bit more capable than others, and they're designing maybe to, you know, maybe a higher standard, if you know what I mean, if you want to put it that way. And then you have students maybe that might, you know, struggle a little bit more, and, you know, you're kind of, as the teacher, you're helping both students to stay within their own, I suppose, level of capabilities. But the projects are never closed off, you know, and it's never a case of there's the drawing, the project's finished, what's next, or, you know, I'm waiting, always to wait for everyone else to catch up. You know, there's always areas to add on. But just to go back to, I suppose, what you were saying, like the integrated approach, I think that there's always ways, like if a student is making a complex cut on a curve and a coping saw blade snaps, that's an opportunity to bring in a little bit about why the blade snapped, and, you know, maybe to talk about the stresses that were being put on the blade, and that it shouldn't be a case of, you know, we do 1 period a week of a theory class, if you want to call it that, you know, there's opportunities there all the time within the subject to, I suppose, demonstrate that with the students.
Thanks for that, Mark. And Lindsay, then just on that, I suppose, capturing learning in our subject is very much, in essence, in the practical sense, you know, in the project, the artifact that they produce. And there's a whole lot of other learning that never gets captured. And I noticed in your video there that your students capture a lot of their learning. They record videos, they reflect. And obviously, Mark, you were looking at reflection as well, a very important aspect of what you do. But just Lindsay there, first of all, in terms of capturing learning, the strategies that you're using, I know people out there might say, oh, but sure, she's got loads of iPads in her school. How on earth could I possibly do it? What could you suggest maybe to somebody out there, a teacher down the country or up in the city, you know, that's trying to capture learning? They're doing the practical work with their students, but they're not capturing this other learning. What would you suggest to them?
Well, I am lucky with the school I'm in, all the students have iPads, so it does make my job a lot easier for capturing because they can video. But the school I was in beforehand, I had my own iPad, that was it. The students didn't have access to it, but I still made them take down step-by-step instructions of how they use the tools. They had to give a hard copy of their portfolio, so it wasn't the digital version of it. So they still had to do sketches of the tools they were using. They still had to write down, how did I use this? what so if I gave a demonstration on the tenon saw, what health and safety aspects did I say they have to mind, how do they have to stand, and then when we're doing a project, the different materials that we're using. So one of the projects we're using now, there's red deal and there's also plywood. So they're looking at the differences between the manufactured boards and the red deal, and that's in their their portfolio. So as Mark said, when you have that opportunity in class, you're talking about the different materials, you're talking about the different tools, you're talking about, well, why am I using PVA glue? Why am I not using super glue? All this kind of stuff with the students. We're a practical subject. Especially the kind of students I know myself, I learn by doing. Theory classes, sitting down, especially with hour-long classes, that's not enjoyable for me as a teacher, and it's not enjoyable for the student. So if I'm doing theory, I have slices of trees that we get up, we look at marking them out, we go outside, we look at the trees outside. We're trying to make it as practical and as interactive as possible. So whether you have a device in or you're doing it on pen and paper, I think it is achievable. It is a bit easier that when they can record videos of themselves doing it, because if they have to go home and try to remember all their steps, that makes it a lot easier for them.
Thanks very much. And Mark, just briefly there, I suppose I'm going to call my colleague Martin in a moment. He might have some questions from the audience. But Mark, just in relation to reflection, seems to be a big thing in your video. And you're very welcome, Martin. I see Martin there in the background. You're very welcome. Okay. So Mark, just on that, in terms of reflection, how are you, why do you feel it's important in the subject?
Yeah, look, I think it's a fantastic thing to really encourage students to do of from first to sixth year, but even us as teachers as well. Like I think every teacher reflects. You could be driving home in the car and you could be thinking, how did that lesson go? Or if you have two different groups within the same year, and just to get students used to doing that. I think Lindsay made a fantastic point earlier on. You get to an evaluation and you have 2 lines, like it went well, or as Lindsay put it, there's no dents in it. But like I talked a lot about self-assessment, and like, look, it is, I know I have a big buy-in there, but it is fantastic. But the real thing with self-assessment is that it's thought-provoking from a student's perspective, and that you're encouraging the students to look back on their journey and, step by step, albeit like through a project. And yes, there's a kind of in the ones I showed, a numerical aspect to that as well, or a percentage, but that's part of it too. What gets measured gets managed, and we all have target grades with students and we try and work towards them. But I think for me, the real learning takes place when a student engages with that self-assessment process and they look at it and they say, look, I got maybe 20 or 25 out of 40 for joint work there, and I know where I went wrong and it's a pity I did there. And then they kind of harness that and they're kind of motivated, nearly like you could compare it to having a bad game in a match, and they go out the next day and they want to kind of right that wrong. And rather than just giving a student, right, there's 77 and there's your project, and maybe they're happy with 77, but maybe they'd love to have 85, and it just helps them, I suppose, to work towards their goals. But the reflective aspect of it, just to get them to think. And I suppose an add-on from that self-assessment sheet that I demonstrated earlier on was even, something you enjoyed about the subject or the project, or something that you do differently the next time. And that could be something as simple as, if they were sawing at an angle, they might orientate the piece in the vise so that the line is vertical, so that they're sawing in a more natural position that they're used to, rather than maybe trying to physically saw at an angle. So just to get them thinking, yeah, it's good.
Great stuff. Thanks very much for that, Mark. So at this stage now, I'm going to hand you over to Martin there. So I might just ask Martin to switch on his microphone briefly for a moment there, Martin.
Evening, folks. How are we?
How are you, Martin? You're very welcome. Good to see you.
Bad.
So I'd like to welcome Martin to the Wood Technology team. Martin's just new to us this year, so very welcome, Martin. So just a little, I suppose, Q&A there from our audience. Martin, did anything pop up in the Q&A?
We have 1 or 2 questions to stand out. There's one actually directed to Mark here. Mark, you talk about students coming up with their own design, and you have an individual cutting list. How do you manage it? How do you manage all of this? I'd say it's very time consuming.
It isn't really, I suppose. Yeah, maybe from the outside looking in, it probably seems like a third year project all over again. but we would have a general idea. So the likes of those storage racks, if you actually go back and look at them, they're all made from similar sections of wood. So we'd have a rough idea of, you know, what timber material is going to be needed to make a storage rack. And rather than just giving the drawing and the bundle of timber and this is where everything goes, we would maybe encourage students to design something around the material that's been given to them. And for example, there could be 2 long sides and there could be 2 shorter centerpieces, but in the case of the student that actually made the spice rack, he had the hand up and he said, could I actually get 4 long pieces, you know? So you kind of control it a little bit. And then, you know, there might be 4 or 5 in the class that might look for 1 or 2 little individual pieces of material, which look, you never mind, because it shows that they're really buying into it and they're invested in it. But yeah, just to kind of have that in mind at the start, this is, you know, what's available to you. And you could even give them the material, and sometimes that can help as well, particularly for second years with the design process.
That's great, Mark. There's another question probably directed at both you and Lindsay. Is there any strategies that that you use? You talk a lot about design. Is there any strategies that you actually use to maybe help develop and promote design thinking in your classroom?
Lindsay, there, I suppose.
Something
maybe
simple.
I would just do like little design challenges. So again, just starting off with a small part of their project. How could I make this better? Or as I said, giving them a little tiny problem, you know, design something that would tidy a desk, get them to research and look at it. It doesn't have to be big at the start. So just little things, and then building up their confidence, because again, when you go to third year and you get that couple of lines, they'll look at it blankly if you haven't given them the opportunity to try and dissolve smaller problems at the start and build it up. So I just think design problems, it doesn't even have to be wood technology. It could be, you know, there's an issue walking from one side of the school to the other. Is there ways that we could come around solving it? So, you know, there's problems in their daily life that they'd come up with ideas, and you can bring that into the classroom and give them little opportunities like that to help them develop.
Thanks very much, Lindsay. I might just take one more question there, Martin, from you, if that's okay.
Yeah, there's actually just one more here. Do you actually make any projects with predetermined joints? Like, do you have actually set us, for example, do you set it has to be a mortise and tenon joint, you have to use a mortise and tenon, or do you actually?
Yeah, most of the projects we'd have some joint, like the birdhouse, we have to use finger joints, having joints, bridle joint, whatever we're using. We'll say to them, we might said these 2 joints have to be this, then they give them an option of they have to design the 3rd joint or something like that. So we'd always, with design, I'd give them, as I said, an idea of, as Mark said, predetermined pieces, and then they have to develop that from there. And then towards the end of second year, we'll do more of a design. Like, I always kind of like the ones that are a bit more open in wood technology. I'll give them one of those as a project, and they have to do a smaller scale of that, where they have to come up with their ideas and designs completely from scratch, so that by the end of second year, they've done like a miniature project and know what they have to do when they come back for the start of next year.
Oh, that's brilliant.
And just Mark, in relation to that as well, I suppose, the practical skills, there might be a specific focus in a project. You might want to introduce a new tool, or maybe it's the mortise gauge for the first time, and that is a definite focus in the project, but there's definitely enough scope there for design. Would that be true for you as well?
Yeah, and like, just to kind of, I suppose, add to what Lindsay said, even if you think back to the mobile phone holders I referred to in my presentation, like that was a piece of like about 45 by 45 onto like kind of a piece of 18mm pine. But you know the students within your class that are going to take on a mortise and tenon there, and then there I think, especially now with common level, there's going to be students that they're just not, it's not within their capabilities, and traditionally they would have maybe struggled if a mortise and tenon was an absolute requirement, and then, you know, I suppose the motivation can drop. So it could be something as simple as a screw joint is still a valid joint, but in that case, you know, and the student, look, it goes together, they feel good, and everyone is winning. And I think now with common level, that's something that all of us as teachers are just going to have to consider a little bit more at the outset. When we're designing projects, they can, you know, cater for all levels of ability.
Okay, thank you very much, Mark. Thanks, Martin, for those questions. We'll chat to you later, Martin. Thank you very much. And at this stage, folks, I'm very conscious it's gone past 6 o'clock, and I just have a couple of more slides, just a few more slides. And what I'd like to do is I'd just like to thank Mark and Lindsay for joining us this evening. I'd like to thank you very, very much for putting those videos together. I know a lot of time and effort went into them, and a lot of thinking. And thanks very much for sharing your teaching and wood technology in action in your own classrooms. And I'm sure people out there appreciate that. So thanks very much, Mark, and thanks very much, Lindsay, and hopefully we'll see you again soon. And at this point, I might ask you to switch off your cameras and your microphones. And thanks very much, folks. So folks, thanks to Lindsay and Mark, and it was great to get some insights into the way they teach in their own classrooms. And there might be some takeaways for yourselves there from this evening. Maybe there's a few ideas or techniques or strategies that you'd like to use for yourselves, and that maybe you could bring back to your own schools and adapt them and develop them for your own students' needs. So I just invite you to just take a very quick moment there, just based on the themes of tonight there, on creativity, skills development, and the integrated approach to teaching and learning in the subject, and the discussion we had with Lindsay and with Mark, and just ask you to maybe jot down some thoughts you have for your own teaching and learning. Maybe there's a few takeaways there. In relation to supports that are available to you, over the last couple of weeks, you may have received some supports from our mailing list, and I'll just maybe draw your attention to some of those right now. So all our supports are available in the technology section of www.jct.ie. When we go in there, then we have a number of tiles. All our CPD materials from previous years and webinars are all in the CPD workshop section. So then we click on wood technology. Last year's CPD workshop is available. It has been repurposed for those of you who missed out on that opportunity last year, and a number of the resources there with a brief description of what is involved in the resource. And also our My Wood Technology Skills Progress Journey reflection resource is there also. In relation to elective workshops, they're available over here on the left-hand side. When you select elective workshops, and you'll see some of our previous webinars there. In relation to assessment, we have an assessment section, which has been updated over the last while. You'll see the wood technology section there once more. And within that there, we have a number of supports in relation to CBA materials. And in the last couple of weeks, we released our resource there in relation to CBA 2, which you can see there. We had a document, some important considerations in preparation for the CBA itself. We also had an interactive poster, which will bring you and direct you to a video, which gives you an overview of CBA 2. There is a PowerPoint presentation there, so the bare presentation is available there itself. And also the video in its totality is there on the right-hand side. This section has been filled in recently with some resources that you might find useful. So this has been updated in the last week or so. Subject Learning and Assessment Review meeting resources. You'll find this useful if you're taking part in SLAR meetings in relation to your CBAs. So you'll see here we have sections on this document here in relation to before the SLAR meeting, during the SLAR meeting, and after the SLAR meeting, and the mechanics involved for teachers and facilitators, and what the aim and the role of the SLAR process is. There's also a document here for the individual teacher. If they're deciding on samples that they're going to bring to a SLAR meeting, you'll find that very, very, very useful. Also, there's a document here for the facilitator of the meeting to organize samples and to have a running order so that the meeting can run smoothly. And then after the meeting, then the facilitator has a little report to fill out. So you might find that useful, folks, if you're still completing that process in your own schools. So after watching this webinar, you might be asking yourself, what on earth am I to do next? So maybe you're thinking about the strategies that you saw tonight. You know, maybe when you go back to your school tomorrow, there might be a little strategy that you'll try out with your own students. Maybe over the course of the next couple of months in your own subject departments, you'd like to have a discussion with your colleagues and decide how you might plan units of learning in the future and how you might encourage the skills of creativity and all the other skills that we were talking about, and also how you might integrate the learning in your classroom. In terms of next year, you're probably thinking about your current third years at the moment, but maybe you have a group of first years coming in next year, and down the road you might be thinking about what kind of strategies could I use to encourage all aspects of the subject in wood technology. So just looking back on this evening and what our focus was for this evening, we explored pedagogical approaches with two teachers, Mark and Lindsay, in their own wood technology classrooms. And we considered strategies that support the incremental development of student skills in wood technology. We also reflected on our insights and learning from this evening's webinar. A recording of this webinar will become available in the coming days in the CPD workshop section at www.gct.ie under the electives tab. From myself and the Wood Technology team, I would like to thank you all for attending and participating in this evening's webinar. Do take care and goodbye.